Hello, welcome, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you all. My name is Véronique Dudoué. I'm Senior Advisor at the Berghoff Foundation in Berlin, and it's a great pleasure to be with you today to moderate this event on political reintegration of women ex-combatants after war, pathways to formal and informal politics. Let me start with some brief technical issues. So this event is taking place in English and in Spanish with simultaneous interpreting, but it will also be interpreted into Thai, Burmese, and Kurdish. If you are viewing this event on a computer, you can select your preferred language via the globe-shaped interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are viewing this event on a mobile device, you can tap on the ellipses, select language interpretation, and select your preferred language. If you have questions to our panelists, and I hope you will have questions to our panelists, you can use the Q&A function on the bar at the bottom of your screen. We will post these instructions now in the chat as well. I'm also very happy to say that this event is part of different initiatives that we are having this week to honor International Women's Day. And we will post as well information on other activities that you can find on our website. So we are today launching 2 new reports, which are part of our Policy Insights series on gender inclusive conflict transformation. This series is part of our project supporting women in resistance and liberation movements in peace negotiations and post-war transitions. This is a project that we initiated already in 2018. And through the project, we have developed and consolidated a peer learning network. We have then used testimonies from network members to put together some insights for peace-building actors on how to support, how to enhance inclusive political transitions, how to support political, social, and economic reintegration of women ex-combatants. Today's event will focus specifically on the political side of reintegration, but we also invite you to read our latest research on long-term social and economic challenges of reintegration faced by women, and we'll also put a link to this new report in the chat as well. So let me say a few words about the topic of today's webinar. And as we explained in the description of this event, many women have taken up arms and have joined resistance liberation movements driven by aspirations for better societies, for more inclusive and more equitable societies. However, peace agreements do not automatically lead to or guarantee the end of discrimination, the end of inequality, including the end of gender inequality. So we found that many women, ex-combatants, find creative solutions to continue their struggle after war, and they remobilize or they find different forms of mobilization in formal as well as informal political space to do so. By formal political space, we mean party and electoral politics. By informal spaces, we mean forms of social mobilization and activism beyond or outside of party politics, more narrowly defined. So today we will be hearing the experiences of 4 inspiring women, the challenges that they have faced, but also the opportunities that they have found in their political trajectories after a peace agreement. So we will have the 4 following panelists. So we will first hear from Victoria Sandino Simanca Herrera. Victoria is a feminist leader from Colombia. She's a former senator of the Republic of Colombia. She's an ex-guerrilla from the FARC-EP. She's a peace signatory and also a former leading member of the Gender Subcommission in the Havana peace process. Then we will be speaking with Martina Anderson from the north of Ireland, who has been an Irish Republican activist all her life. She is a former political prisoner. She was released on her 40th year of imprisonment under the terms of Ireland's peace accord, the Good Friday Agreement. Since her release, she has served in various political functions, including as an elected member of the Assembly, MLA, as a minister, as a member of European Parliament, and she's currently Sinn Féin's representative to Europe. We will also be speaking with Morena Herrera from El Salvador, who is a feminist activist, a human rights defender, a member of the Feminist Collective for Local Development and Citizens Association for the Decriminalization of Abortion. She's a veteran of the FMLN guerrilla during the civil war in El Salvador. And finally, we will be also speaking with Johanny Dimalao Ibad from the Bangsamoro in the Philippines. She's a former combatant who served as battalion commander in the Bangsamoro Islamic Women Auxiliary Brigades, so the Women's Auxiliary Brigade of the MILF. She's also chairperson of Daladap Women in Press Marketing Cooperative. So very happy to have those four brilliant women with us today. The way that this session will be organized is that first I will speak for about 10 minutes with each of the panelists. Then we will have time for a question and answer session with all of you. And then at the end, I will come back to each of them, asking them for a brief closing remark, one recommendation that they would like to share with the peace building community. So I will now start with Victoria Sandino. So I will ask first Victoria if she could briefly introduce herself and tell us why she decided to remain politically active after the signing of the peace accord in Colombia. And then after a brief answer, I will ask her a follow-up question. Victoria,
Hola,
over to
Veronique, y un abrazo.
Good morning. I greet you. I'm also really thankful for your invitation. I also greet the other panelists who joined the meeting. The reason why I have decided and I have continued working at the political level is precisely because I was part of a revolutionary and insurgent organization that was seeking for transformation. Our political activism began when I was very young. So coming back to the political scenario was a good opportunity so I could continue working for the transformation of Colombia.
Many thanks, Victoria. Maybe as a reminder for everyone, if you want to hear this in English, if you do not understand Spanish, you have to click the English button at the bottom of your screen. Now, Victoria, I would like to ask you, as someone who was a driving force behind the inclusion of the gender component in the Havana Peace Agreement, if you could describe to us, as you do in your paper that we are also launching today, what did you see in the Havana process as an opportunity to transform society and ensure women's political participation, but also contrast that with the reality that you faced after the agreement when you entered the political arena? What challenges did you find then? Could you describe those to us? Thank you.
Gracias. Yo tengo una presentación, no sé si la
I
pueden
have
hacer.
a presentation. I don't know if you can share it.
Por favor, si la están...
Please you tell me if people can see my presentation.
Muchas gracias. Efectivamente.
Thank you very much.
Mira, ahí como estableces, pues,
So as it is established, peace is definitely an opportunity to transform the society and to guarantee the political participation of women. We have proved during the Havana process, where we could, as you expressed it before, to contribute to an agreement using our subcommission that gave all the gender approach to the whole agreement. That was very important for Colombian peace and also for women in our country. So regarding our political exercise, in 2018, because the Congress, the National Congress of Colombia from 2018 to 2022 was composed by 276 seats in Cámara and Senado. But from these 276 seats, women were just 55. That was the 93%. And men were 221, so they represented the 80% of the seats. What's the meaning of that? It's just to show you the women participation situation in Colombia at the political field, because it has been absent, actually. In those conditions, we arrived to exert our role as politicians in our country. So our challenges as peace signers, which are even more difficult, we found that the first thing was the stigmatization for having been a combatant. Me, for example, a Black woman, and in Colombia, the racial discrimination is a huge one. And today, nowadays, we have a vice president who is Black woman, and he has been attacked all the time just for being a Black woman. Also, our peasant background and feminist background. So I said I was a feminist woman, and that's why I was working at the subcommission of gender. And there was a lot of hate speeches against me by the extreme right. And this was aimed to a particular woman, mostly for being former combatants, but also against women. It's a hate speech against women. And in that specific condition we had, so leaders, peasants, Black women, and feminists. Obviously, this is the biggest challenge we faced, so you could speak to the society. Another element, and it is a painful perspective, and it is the mistrust towards women by our comrades, by our own colleagues, by the people we were working with, commanders, for example, of the insurgency. These things I am sharing you is my own experience. I don't want to say that it's the experience of everybody. I hope it's not. For women who have been part of insurgencies, I really hope they haven't really experienced what I had to face. So there is a mistrust from our organization itself. And secondly, and unfortunately, the violent action of some comrades, mostly by commanders. So violence against leaderships for those who had an independent and autonomous perspective, and we were exerting a leadership. Because guerrillas, as you know, are hierarchical organizations. And unfortunately, even if we achieve some leadership or some kind of range within the organization, always we had to obey men. And when we returned to the civil society, we didn't deconstruct this build. And some of our comrades are very patriarchal and chauvinist. So when they see how women have a great leadership, so it started to confront them. And the way they express it is blocking us. In my case, I lost my seat. That was for 2 different periods, but I just lasted one because I declared myself as a feminist and in favor of our women. So it provoked all these reactions within and among our former comrades. Another important challenge is your own demands. How do you challenge yourself? Because not everything is at the public level. Privately, you face a lot of difficulties, your personality, your self-esteem. So your being, it causes you pain, and it challenges you a lot because you don't receive solidarity so easily. For instance, our colleagues, our comrades, they want to continue fighting and keep struggling, but they also fear. They don't want to be harmed or affected by the commanders. So you stay alone with this. So they were afraid of raising their own demands as women. So you have a lot of challenges towards yourself. During the Havana, I did a master's degree, for example. I couldn't sleep well. I just slept 3 hours during every day, so I could answer to the negotiation table, to the subgender commission, and besides this, my master's degree. So I could really be on the level, so I could answer to all the demands that were expecting from me. I started to study sociology, and I just recently finished. I received my title this week after 4.5 years, almost 5. And that's very demanding for me. Other conditions, challenges, and difficulties that are related to the lack of economic resources for the political activism, for leadership, to make our work at the territorial level, which was our main engagement. And finally, there are 2 positive aspects I would like to highlight, and it is the public exercise of politics, the official one. It was a beautiful opportunity for me to raise my flags as a woman and all the excluded populations in the defense and advocacy of dignified life and the organization with women. I work on that within the Congress, but also permanently in territories. So we permanently try to put politics at the social service level. And this is a vindication that I always have as a feminist woman. Politics should be a social service to transform the society, to build equality in terms of gender also, and that dignified society's life, women's life, and different ways of life. We are worried, not at the discourse level. We're worried about environment, for example, at our land level, territories level. Women are caregivers, caretakers of our crops, of our sands, of our environment. They are peace builders, even if they are not recognized. And I think that's a core role we play at the political level. So that's the main aspect I wanted to share with you. So I'm open for questions, comments, and what you consider.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for this open sharing of insights, as you said, on the societal challenges, the internal challenges, the personal challenges, but also how you tried to educate yourself and to see politics as a space for social transformation. I'm sure there's already a lot of questions for you from the audience, but we will leave it for now and come back to you later on. I will first like to turn to our next panelist. So I will turn to Martina. And here as well, Martina, I would like to maybe ask you to firstly briefly introduce yourself and what's led to want to be active politically after the peace agreement.
Good afternoon, and I have to say I'm delighted to be on the panel, particularly with the other participants. I haven't had an opportunity to meet you before, so delighted to be here. My name is Martina Anderson, and I'm Sinn Féin's representative to Europe. And as a former political prisoner, I think I and other former political prisoners that we engaged initially as non-elected activists, you know, to contribute constructively to the peace process. And I think we were leveraging our unique insights and experiences to advocate and advance solutions that addressed the root causes of the conflict.
Thank you. I think when we spoke in preparation of this session, you also explained how when you were in prison, you would never have imagined one day to become an elected politician. You heard about a lot of challenges that Victoria has been facing in Colombia. I would love to hear whether you recognize yourself in some of those challenges as a former political prisoner and activist yourself. But also on the more positive side, what do you see as the benefits for national liberation movements and other movements to take the struggle to formal democratic politics after a peace agreement?
Well, there was some of what Victoria said that I could relate to, not all. I think it would be remiss of me, given the event that we're holding is for International Women's Day. I think as someone who cherishes and is a cherished advocate of equality, I see International Women's Day as a way of marking the strength and the resilience and the unwavering determination of women, and some of whom did not make it through their own respective struggles. So I think today, as we embark on maybe a journey of reflection and empowerment and honouring the indomitable spirit of women across the globe, unite with all the other panelists and yourselves there, I think, to amplify the voices of incredible women. So I'm 3 days early, but I want to wish you all happy International Women's Day. And I hope that we can all celebrate everything that embodies the essence of progress, inclusivity, and the limitless potential of every woman. So, as you said, I was released in November 1998 on my 14th year under the terms of Ireland's peace accord, the Good Friday Agreement. I was serving life imprisonment, and I, like many other former political prisoners, immediately upon release became involved in political activity, as I said earlier, for several reasons, mainly with the overarching goal of advancing the peace and political process in Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement, Ireland's peace accord, it was not and is not a destination. However, for the first time, it provided a peaceful and a democratic pathway towards national self-determination in Ireland, and it sought to address the underlying causes of the conflict and promote reconciliation. I think former political prisoners' involvement in the political arena served as a powerful symbol of transformation and reconciliation. I think demonstrating to the wider community in Ireland and in the north of Ireland that former combatants can work together within a democratic framework. Now, it's been my experience that sometimes that is done more comfortably by some behind closed doors, where they can engage more meaningfully. But once you open those doors, they can behave differently in public, where they have to, I think some of them feel, particularly the men, that they have to put on a front for their hardliners. The involvement of Irish Republican women, former combatants and former prisoners in the former political arena, I think, was a demonstration in Ireland that the war is over and that a democratic level playing field, exists where, well, I suppose it afforded opportunities and challenges to advance national political objectives. So despite facing unique challenges, that it's undeniable that women particularly we're tried to be put back in our box, where societal norms, I think, and prejudices Victoria had talked about, particularly we have faced them in conservative Ireland. Us women, have played an absolute crucial role in shaping and advancing the democratic landscape after the conflict in Ireland. Republican women, particularly those of us who were involved in the military conflict, just as Victoria has said, you know, by wider society, we did face multifaceted challenges. You know, we have been often met with outright disdain and even disgust by some for taking up arms and being involved in a war that was viewed as the sole terrain of men. You know, the perception that women should confine ourselves to domestic duties rather than actively engaging in military or political struggles for that, you know, has been regarded as more egregious than that of my male comrades. Irish Republican women like myself and others and many others have faced unique challenges, especially once we moved from a non-elected position into an elected position. You know, if we had stayed in the background and were not seen or heard, then, you know, for those that value societal norms in the context of conservative Ireland, then they could ignore, or so they felt, they could ignore us. And we were viewed as maybe less threatening in the background to the norms of society. And like many others, my situation's not unique. I've been frowned upon, threatened in social media with rape, people saying they wanted to kill me, comments about my appearance, how I look, what I wear, how I speak. I'm apparently sore on their ears, sound like the fishwife, and shrill. And all of that is used as an attempt, I think, to take away from what I have been saying or what I said, and used to undermine credibility and to dismiss my perspectives. Whereas I think for an outspoken male comrade, that's considered that they are robust and they possess valuable qualities that are applauded. Now, there is a tendency, I think, to prefer in Ireland softly spoken, nurturing females who depict fluff, so long as they don't have too much substance, and to regard outspoken, powerful, confident women they want to relegate us out of public eye, as our presence challenge the established norms and disturb the conventional understanding of femininity. So regardless of all of that, I've not allowed mainly male opponents disdain or their influence over other women to silence me. Instead, I am an advocate for the cause of Irish unity, self-determination, national democracy, challenging stereotypes, and I believe contributing significantly to the Irish Republican struggle. I'm proud of who I am. I am proud of the journey that I have travelled, and if others are not, then that's their entitlement. And it's also, I believe, their problem. So whilst I was reluctant, as you said, to become involved in institutional democratic politics, I never foreseen myself entering into the formal political arena. In fact, I didn't want to. I had to be persuaded more than once to stand for election. I do accept that the transition from conflict to peace requires a comprehensive engagement that includes former combatants. So if you exclude women from such a process, I think perpetuates a limited perspective and hinders the development of, you know, an inclusive, representative democracy. I'm a firm advocate for participatory democracy. And I believe that it fosters a more inclusive and sustainable peace, not just representative democracy, but inclusive democracies. And smart leaders, I think, know that. So I think in the journey towards national liberation and the establishment of a democratic society, you know, the active participation of Irish Republican women has proved to be indispensable. My own experience, my resilience, and my determination does challenge traditional gender biases, which does still exist in Ireland. And I believe, and myself and others have, however, fostered an atmosphere where individuals can be evaluated based on their ideas, competence, and abilities. But it is still an arena where robust, outspoken women in politics are subjected to discrimination and, superficial judgments. So here in Ireland, probably like everywhere else, there is a road yet to be travelled.
Thank you so much, Martina, for sharing those thoughts. And I'm very happy that you did decide to be an outspoken, robust, confident woman, as you say. And I think judging by the political leadership of your party, it seems to me that the party also recognizes the need for such women leaders. So well done to you and the rest of your party also for your political success. Thank you. I will turn back to you later on, and I will now go to Morena in El Salvador. So I think similarly to the other previous two panelists, Morena, if you could first, in your own words, briefly describe who you are and why did you decide to take the path that you took, and then I will ask you a subsequent question.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buenos días.
So thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm also pleased for being here and meet this interesting panelist. I am a social fighter. I define myself as a feminist activist and human rights defender. In Salvador, we had an armed and civil war conflict. And before this civil war finished, I joined two women from the urban areas, from the popular movement, from cities, and others that were from the rural. As me, I came from this rural movement. And actually, our moment when we decided to gather was because a man asked us or proposed us to form an organization to fight or to find resources also with women's voices. So we started to analyze how we were lived as women, this experience of being part of the guerrilla. And the first reflections led us to say, that's what they want, but what do we want? So we start to analyze that we were ready to give our lives. Many of our comrades died, men and women, during this armed conflict. But we saw that this transformation of life proposal and the recognition of women's rights were not really on the agenda, on the proposals for the agreement, peace agreement, but also were not present at the social demand level. So that was our first engagement, not continue struggling or not keep pushing struggles that would let us aside and would postpone our own rights or demands. And in that way, I started to join with other women and to gather with them so we could give birth to a new organization that soon would meet feminist ideas, feminist proposals of transformation for our society.
Thank you. Exactly. This is where I would want to take the conversation now. In El Salvador, the FMLN has been very effective as a political party, has been in the lead in the presidential seats in the country for many years. But you decided to rather pursue your goals through social activism, what we call in the paper that we are launching informal politics. Could you maybe explain to us some of the advantages that you saw in going to politics in the informal way, and what achievements did you gain doing that?
Bueno, yo pienso por una parte que las mujeres.
On the one hand, I think that women need to participate in at the formal arena of politics. And of course, in what you call informal politics. I prefer to call it feminist and women's movement. I personally think that the feminist movement has become an important actor to broaden our perspective and for all that participate at the formal level on politics. After so many years of work, I had an experience participating at the municipal level, at the municipal government, local government. What I remember is that my ideas were also towards working at this political formal sphere, and I worked also with a citizens movement because I thought it was important to know which were the roofs and the floors this municipal sphere had, and how this could contribute to the feminist movement. So what I think is that our experience, without denying the need of being also at the formal politics, has been that without the ideas, proposals, and the perspective, the broad perspective of the feminist formal politics has a lack of the important movement that could also even give the pathway where to go in terms of ways and politics that definitely would contribute to transform reality. In this case, social movements and the feminist movement is precisely to give the mobilization, to launch and lead and drive other forces, also establishing some limits of the formal politics. So we push to open new spaces. In the case of Salvador, to build these feminist and women's organizations from different dimensions and different ages also have been very important. In 1994, 2 years after the peace agreements, we achieved to create our first government program as a proposal. It was an autonomous program. Obviously, as Victoria was telling, our comrades were not really, didn't agree with our own demands or with us because we were fighting for our own demands. Nevertheless, these programs we call Women 94 because it was the year in which the first elections took place after the Civil War. It was a core moment for us because we say it was clear we were not present at the agreement, and it was clear for us that it was our task to build our own program. Of course, we had to make alliances with other people and participate at the formal level, but we built our own program. And up to that moment, we started with a demanding process building at the municipal level, the local level, in which women started to be aware of the competences of the public instances, because at the beginning we were demanding things without knowing the capacity of a specific institution, for example. So we started to learn, we had to learn what were the faculties of the institutions, what could the municipal governments do or not. So our demands could definitely be possible or having any kind of answer. That was another important lesson we learned. We crossed the country with local organizations of women, building platforms of demands at the local level, and we managed to negotiate with different parties. And that was the other lesson we learned during that moment. It is so important that women can definitely find the channels, the communication means independently from the political party from which we are part of. Women's subordination makes necessary our gathering. And that's the way we built the other association in which I was a general secretary, Andrisa's association. It was a national association of mayors from Salvador. Andrisa's exists also. It's still existing now, and it has different characteristics. On the one hand, it is made by all political parties that had a representation at the local level, and on the other hand, it gathers women that are not anymore at the political level. So it promotes the transmission of knowledge, experiences from the ones who are at the political field and the ones who are at the informal political field. So that's why I have been also motivated by research, and I have been researching a lot about political participation of women at the municipal level. And what we found is all the obstacles we face when we want to make politics, and we started to analyze re-election. Re-election, now in Salvador, we have a debate towards re-election, presidential re-election, which is not allowed by the Constitution. Told our current president was re-elected. And at the municipal level, it was allowed, not at the presidential level, but at the municipal one. And we research on how was the process of re-electing men or women. So while women were re-elected 7 times more, women just 1. What was the meaning of that? It meant women accumulated less experience and we get burned easily. That's the way we express it. So from outside, from our organizations and feminist organizations, we put on evidence the limits and obstacles women were facing at the formal politic level. Another arena we were researching, and I myself did an important research on that, and it was about political violence women were facing at this municipal level. And unfortunately, and very sadly, I realized that there was no difference between one left and right political party. All of them, as soon as they saw a leadership of women that were inconvenient for them, they all disaccredited them. As Martina was also saying, how the sexual objectivization of women as a privilege tool they used so they can weaken women. And they used also other mechanisms of weakness that led us to a structural violence. And that's why we dare to participate. And that's exactly the moment in which I see the relationship between women who are at the feminist movement and women who are at the formal politics. And I want also to tell you that some years ago, it was very hard for me to identify myself as war veteran, but I am. That's what I am. And I reflected on that with other colleagues and comrades. And after 30 years of the peace agreement, it was necessary to conform, to create an association of war veterans. And we were about to have the legal representation, and then we realized there was another veterans organization. So I started to search them, and we started to work together and build together a proposal of transformation at the social level from our own experience. And what I recognize is that there is a lot of will and vocation of women of transmitting history. from an intergenerational perspective. And I think that's very important. We know that our motivations are related to a more democratic society. And it's not easy. We know that's a difficult path and it's far away from, despite all we have been fighting, even though we keep a lot of hope on young people and women because we can transmit our knowledge. So I keep working. I am linked to the feminist movement. Now, currently, we're facing a very difficult situation, an onslaught from our, that's a word I would like to vindicate, which is a guerrillera word. The onslaught we are facing now is very difficult. We are being attacked. This gender myths that exist, and we have a governmental speech that is trying to onslaught our own aspirations and to diminish us. But we don't want to go back to the kitchen. One thing is we like to cook or not. And another different thing is the kitchen is also a field of work. And that we are just recruited to the house and to the kitchen and only in care activities, that's the other thing. And now when we are talking to young women in Salvador and they don't want to go back to this private field, and we are resisting from the feminist perspective. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you so much, Morena, for those thoughts and for explaining to us the complementarity between formal and informal spaces of activism, including at the local level. I find that quite interesting. Also, the importance of joining forces with other sectors, the importance of research and evidence and transmitting your history across generations. Again, I'm sure there's a lot of questions for you from the audience, but before doing that, I will turn to our last panelist. And I think it's interesting that Morena mentioned the forming of an association of war veterans, because that's also linked to the experience that we want to discuss with Johanny. Johanny, first, thank you for being here with us. And would you like to briefly introduce yourself? And why did you decide to be politically or socially active after the peace agreement in Bangsamoro?
Thank you, Vero. A greeting of peace to all of us. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of us. I am Johanny Ibad, 28 years old, and I am a former combatant. And I used to be a battalion commander of 118 Battalion BWAB. And let me share with you a brief history how I became a BWAB. I started my life as a BWAB at a very young age. I think I was 18 years old at that time. And I joined to the group of BWAB, or the Women Combatant of the MILF, because I'm motivated by the difficult experiences that we had. And also I'm motivated by my father. And he used to be a commander of the BF MILF. And before I became BWAB, I remember the time when I was young. It's a very rare to see in my father, or our father, because most of his time is in the camp. Every time he left us at home to go to camp or in the battlefield, we were left without anything. Even sometimes even a single peso was nothing, but he has to do that to fight for the right, justice, and self-determination, not only for us but for the Bangsamoro. And that was a difficult time for us, and it molds me to join to the women combatants of the MILF, that there was no expectation to return, but to achieve the right, justice, self-determination, and the real meaning of peace for the Bangsamoro that we deserve or that they deserved. And as of the moment that we are in the transition period, since the MILF and the GPX or the government of the Philippines come up with the peace agreement, I decided to remain as a informal political activist because as a former combatant and as a part of the Bangsamoro government, we must have to transform ourselves and our organization into social movement or civilian and normal life. And this is what we found is to be able to sustain our service to the community, especially the women in the grassroots level.
Thank you, Johanny. If you could now tell us a little bit more about the experience that you've had together with other women from BWAB in forming a self-led women's organization called LIMU, where you seek to continue to serve your community. And by doing so, by being involved in the informal political space, as we're calling it, what are you finding is easy or challenging for you to influence governance, to influence state building, to influence the implementation of the agreement at the formal level? Are you finding it easy, possible, or are you finding it challenging to do that through civil society activism in comparison with formal politics?
As we wanted, as a decision lead us to another member of BWAB to form a self-led organization, as we wanted to continue and preserve the group we built, as now we are in the transition period and we are transforming into social movement, we decided to form a self-led women organization for every battalion of the BWAB. In year 2019, we had a tailor-made training participated by the all battalion and the brigade staff of BWAB in Davao, and it was funded and supported by the Berga Foundation through Moro Women Development and Cultural Center. It was a time that we came up an umbrella organization, which is the League of Moro Women Organization Incorporated, and we try it to get it registered to the SEC or the Security Exchange Commission to become a legal organization. Because we believe that through this self-led organization, we can sustain and continue to serve the community, and we can promote inclusivity, especially women or in the BWAB to the community. And also we can have meaningful participation in the government. Through this self-led organization, the women in the community has given them a series of capacity building training so that they can strengthen and empower, especially when it comes to women's rights and their political participation. Even if it is not in a formal politics. And that's not all, because through self-led organization, the women or the BWAB in the community are also provided livelihood training and programs to promote and strengthen their skills in terms or when it comes to business and entrepreneurship that they can use to sustain their livelihood, not only for them, but also for the next generation of the Bangsamoro. And through this self-led organization, we achieved the recognition of the community, the local government unit, and the region, in the entire region. And even some international non-governmental organization and national, and in the level of the national, our organization well recognized. And for myself, as a former combatant, I can say that I achieved the recognition for myself through this I became an officer of recently I became an officer of Women Federation of our municipality. And also I serve as a parasocial worker in our municipality under the office of our municipal social worker development office. Through this we can deliver, we can give more capacity building in the women to the grassroots level in terms of their women's rights and other. And for the well recognition of our umbrella self-organization, which is the League of Moro Women Organization Incorporated, we are having a support and fundings from some of internationally non-governmental organizations that we can use to provide services like capacity building training and livelihood training and programs to our members and at the grassroots level. And some of us become employee to our self-led organization, so that we can say this as an achievement of our self-led organization. But the challenges for us right now is that we still have colleagues at the grassroots level, especially our member from outcore of the BARM, who have not been reached by the program due to the limited funding support. And the limitation I found when it comes to the influencing of governance or state building through civil society activism, I found it is when civil society activism, I have found it is all activities, goals, and objectives are for the benefit, goodness of the majority, or we can say diverse interests, and how the community in the grassroots level, especially women, become strengthened and empowered for their rights, and also their meaningful political participation. And in civil society activism, there are more inclusivity, and the civil society activism relies on the funding support. That's what I have found. And when it comes to political party, I have found that all activities depend on how the political party is strengthened and how the political party list wins. And as I said a while ago, the civil society activism, in civil society activism, there more inclusivity, like for us, we can openly participating in shaping the governance, policy, and programs, and others through consultation and discussion. But it doesn't mean that we are involved in shaping governance, that we are included in the party list, and we can run easily for any position in the government. So that, as I said again, and in civil society activists, there are more inclusivity.
Thank you so much, Johanny, for taking us through what you have found already to be the advantages and the challenges of transforming into a civil society organization. What you say is important about civil society space being more inclusive maybe than party politics, but also you still have challenges in reaching out to the more remote, the more isolated former combatants in your community. Your transition is much more recent than the other three panelists, so we're very happy to also hear about our younger generation of ex-combatants and hopefully that you can also learn from the mistakes and challenges you heard from the co-panelists. I will actually now bring back our 4 guests to have a round of question and answers based on what we started receiving through the Q&A. We already collected a few questions from the audience, but we would encourage you to ask more questions, and I will pick them up. So yes, bringing our 4 wonderful women together. Maybe I will first ask a question around something that Victoria, you mentioned at the beginning, and that we've heard echoed as well from the other panelists, this issue of stigmatization of women ex-combatants when trying to become politically active. So maybe Victoria first, or any of the others who would like to add, if you could give concretely examples of how does that stigmatization manifest itself in the communities, and what can be done to redress that stigma. Have you seen any improvements under the presidency of Petro? Has anything changed in the social reactions to you, Victoria, as a political leader ex-combatant? Maybe starting with you and then seeing if someone else would like to add.
Gracias. Bueno, efectivamente.
Thank you. Yes, stigmatization is experienced also by hate. Hate is promoted within communities. If we went to a rural community, we didn't face problems. People used to recognize us, and they saw good that we visited them and that we were speaking in favor of women. But the means of communication and at the public level, then we experienced this campaign, this hate campaign against me and all the women who had a leadership. For instance, women were presented as victims or perpetrators. If we are seen as victims, then we are seen as poor people that were mistreated and who didn't have any political agency. So, disabled people. And if we were seen as perpetrators with a public leadership, as I was, because many of my comrades, we always started to work at the territorial level, and that was very important for all women. Not all of us were at the public stage or communitarian level, and not even at the formal political level. So then they attacked us. So matrix of information, for example, to be a proxenete, I was accused of being a pimp, a violent woman, a criminal. So what they were seeking, they were misrepresenting our political leadership, our capacities, and even our own existence. And it hurts a lot. It's even worse than being shot, to be bombed, to get harmed because of war. These things are more harmful for us. And this is one side. But there is another side which is also very painful, and what most of us experience, and it is the political, verbal aggression, and all these kinds of tricks on politics, which are not correct, as Morena was mentioning, and Martina also. Morena in the sense that men are terrorized when women start to make decisions, when we have projects. And this makes from our exercise very difficult. And I see this is a not correct politics. because it's not related to social service. So there was any difference between the extreme right with our commanders at a moment, revolutionary commanders. We were all talking about a more just society, a different society, and then you face this. That's very harmful. What is happening now with the current government? I think stigmatization is still been a very strong challenge. I think I supported more than 1 year at the peace commissioner level for 1 year and 6 months. I was paid for doing my job, but it's missing a lot. And Norway gave this support, this economic support. I just had 2 months contract with the government. The rest was paid by Norway because I had difficulties with my security study, because I was former combatant. And I was surprised because for being an former combatant, I was stigmatized to find a job. And I still having problems to find a job. We continue being stigmatized outside from the Congress. If I want to be a teacher, or if I want to give workshops or any kind of job related, that's not easy. It's not easy at all. So I continue suffering unemployment. So I don't see too many changes. I think there is less pressure in terms of the direct attacks against me, for example, but there are other kind of situations that don't allow us to have a real leadership, to be in permanent changes, in activism, in many things. We're still doing so, but we are facing a lot of difficulties. The lack of resources are a problem.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm sure this resonates, or some of this resonates with what the other panelists have experienced. Maybe I will turn to Martina next for your reactions to this, but also there was a question addressed to you, like in comparison with what Victoria has explained about the stigmatization within her own movement and within revolutionary movements. How does that compare? Or is there a different culture maybe within the Irish Republican movement and Sinn Féin that allows women to be maybe more greatly recognized, and you haven't faced the same level of internal discrimination that we've heard? And so that's one question to you. And then maybe if I can add another one, someone else asked, what can be done differently in peace agreements? Anything kind of now thinking retroactively, in your case, the Good Friday Agreement, anything that could have been done differently to better prepare the reintegration of women, ex-combatants, ex-prisoners in society?
Well, I think to take your first question first, during the conflict in Ireland, and I'm talking about the earlier days, and I'd have been quite young, I was only a child, but I have talked to other women, and women had to fight. You know, women didn't become involved in the conflict as backups for men. But at the early days, some of them felt that there was this attitude, and it was societal norms. You know, we came from a very conservative society, we still do. And in those norms, you know, women should have been in the house cooking and cleaning and having babies, not actually involved in a conflict. So some men felt, you know, they needed to protect the women. So women had to establish themselves, and they did. You know, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, and there's, you know, people will have maybe their own stories to tell. And like Victoria, everyone, and it's not just applicable to women, everyone who had been involved in the conflict as former political prisoners released, we have all faced barriers in society as former political prisoners. You know, there are travel bans, there are places you won't get access into, America and elsewhere. And I think for women, there's also something that's probably unspoken, and that's for the number of women who have served very long years in prison. and came out and their biological clock might have stopped, or in my own case, and I'll not go into it, after being butchered by a gynecologist in Durham Prison in England. You know, we are banned from adopting children. We're banned from fostering a child. So there are still to this day those barriers, even though our peace process is over 25 years old. There are still those barriers that exist for all prisoners, political prisoners, whether they are male or female. But I think in relation to the issue of children, you know, a man can come out of jail in his 70s and still father a child. That is not the case for women. Sinn Féin, to answer the question in relation to what can be done during peace processes, I think it depends on the political strength that parties have to that process. We didn't have the political strength at the time of the Good Friday Agreement. It was not a Republican document. However, it contained enough within that document, and the right to self-determination was one in the document, and a political level playing field established that enabled change to take place and transformation in society. So trying to get within the initial stages of peace processes when they are being taken forward, the rights of women, of human rights, like there was a Bill of Rights contained in the Good Friday Agreement to be brought forward, you know, over 25 years on. And here in the north of Ireland, we still don't have the Bill of Rights that was agreed in the Good Friday Agreement. So even though you can have provisions in an agreement, does not mean that the implementation of those agreements will be taken forward. And I think that's the political arena that we find ourselves in, trying to advance progressive politics. Sinn Féin as a party is quite progressive compared to what I've been listening to. I think from some of the other speakers here, the culture in Sinn Féin in Ireland North and South is different to what has been described. Without doubt, despite the barriers that women face in society, growing up in a conservative society and still having to challenge some of those barriers. But, you know, we in Sinn Féin, our structure is All Ireland, even though there's 2 jurisdictions because of the partition of our country. But as a party, it's an All Ireland structure. So the president of Sinn Féin is a woman, Mary Lou MacDonald. She's a member of Leinster House, a TD elected member. She's quite progressive in her outlook, in her politics, and the leader of the Assembly. And the First Minister, who has just recently taken up office, if anyone has been following what's been happening here in the north of Ireland after the Democratic Unionist Party had boycotted the Assembly. So the First Minister and the leader in the Assembly in the north of Ireland and the Vice President of Sinn Féin is Michelle O'Neill. So we have 2 women at the very top of our political party. And there are a number of women, some of them very young women, who are members of the Assembly, member of Leinster House, local government. We have councils coming up, council elections in the south of Ireland during the year. And we have also MEPs, women standing for the position of MEPs. I was an MEP myself. I was a junior minister to the late Mark McGuinness. So we have found that there have been a lot of encouragement given to women to come forward and, you know, take on positions and take on roles. And throughout Sinn Féin, it is populated with non-elective activists who are women. So I think in any peace process, to go back to the answer of what someone had said in relation to how can you influence the shape and the form of a peace process so that women can find their rightful place at the table? If you are dealing with right-wing conservative elements in society, that at the time of the process that they have got more political strength than progressive parties, I think therein lies the challenge and the difficulty that all of us face. But that is not to say that as time goes on and as political strength is hopefully developed further, for those who would be involved in more and want to see more progressive politics taking place. Then at that time, you can see that nothing great, truly great has ever been achieved alone. You have to have participatory democracy. And that's why I'm a firm believer in participatory democracy, not just representative democracy, not that people are elected into institutions and they themselves alone make decisions. There has to be an involvement of society, of women in society, and that includes former combatants. That includes when you have it, particularly when you're emerging from conflict, and that includes all of society finding that they have got a place and a space to shape a progressive, hopefully, outlook in society so that the next generation of children do not have to go through what we went through.
Thank you so much, Martina, for your comprehensive response. We have less than 15 minutes left, and there's still a lot of interesting questions. Maybe let me turn to you, Morena, for a brief insights on the one hand, what have you seen as the impact of the democratic setback in El Salvador on the quality of life for women? And looking forward, there's one question in the chat about how can we bring up boys differently so that the younger generations of women activists do not face the same challenges? Any insights you'd like to offer on that?
Sí, bueno, gracias. Yo pienso que...
Well, thank you. First, I would like to say something about stigmatization. I think stigmatization is something that paralyzes us, and what we need is to make this more relative. And I think that's important because this accreditation of women in our societies, mostly when they are so conservative to societies, it is a weapon against women. That's why we have to diminish all these things that grow, and we can be paralyzed by this stigmatization. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I think intergenerational dialogue as a methodology, for example, the annual analysis of the impacts on the different generations of armed conflicts, because they have an impact on society. Also because of the loss, but also the achievements also. The loss have to do with people that have participated on the war, but also with the other generations that got affected by these impacts. So I need to analyze it also during many different generations. So we need to be able to work with the different generations involved, seeking for their experiences and ideas to be expressed also, because they are valid and important. And finally, what I think towards how to strengthen women that are in these peace negotiation processes, I think that when there is a negotiation process, we need to ask always where women are. How are they? And if we identify them, we need to strengthen them. Because I think any woman could be completely free if there are other oppressed women within the world. And that's a belief from the feminist movement, the international one. It is not about we are all equal. That's not true. We live different realities, but there are important aspects that have to do with self-determination of each woman, which is a core aspect to advocate for. And if in Ireland things are difficult, then we have to support Ireland, also in Colombia or in Philippines, or savage women. I think it is about to strengthen our women's leadership within negotiation peace processes, so women could have voice and recognition of their own rights and demands. Thank you.
Thank you also for mentioning the importance of women at the negotiation table, finding them and strengthening them. I want to say that we will soon have another paper exactly on this topic, looking at what roles women play formally and informally during peace processes. And we will have another event on this soon that we will advertise. But thank you already for raising your own thoughts on the topic. Maybe I will now turn to each of you, asking you for one final recommendation. So I will go to Johanni first. We haven't heard back in this round. So Johanni, if you could give us your one recommendation for international peace-building organizations that might be here in the call today, what can they do concretely to support women ex-combatants in their political pathways?
For me, as a new phase of reintegration, I recommend to let's keep this conversation going, so that we can use the best practices of other women ex-combatant as a guide to strengthen our political participation even more. Thank you.
Thank you. So more of this, continue the conversation, strengthen the network of solidarity, as I've heard as well from the others. So give those women space to learn from each other. I will now go to Morena. Who could you give us your one recommendation? How can we as peace builders do things differently to support you in addressing the challenges we heard today?
Yo creo que es importante fortalecer los liderazgos de las mujeres.
I think it's important to strengthen women leaderships at the intergenerational level, also dialogues at the national and international level. I think peace cannot be true while there is violence and discrimination against women and people. What I think it is necessary to peace is an aspiration, but we need also to use it as a tool against discrimination and oppressions. Thank you.
Thank you. And indeed, having already in this call different generations of women, I think is a great resource so that we can all learn from each other. And I think this idea you have around doing more work around intergenerational dialogue is a very important one indeed. Let me now turn to Martina for your recommendation to us as peace builders.
Well, I suppose my recommendation would be based on what I said earlier, to advance participatory democracy as opposed to solely representative democracy, you know, and to live your ideology on your sleeve and demonstrating that internationalism and progressive nationalism are two sides of the same coin. As Marina said, we must ensure that we have solidarity with other struggles. And that is where internationalism comes in. And I think when any of us get an opportunity, we have to use the international stage, as I hope I did as an MEP, to shine lights of injustices in other parts of the world. And I think it would be remiss of us not to call out what is happening in Palestine at this moment in time. I have stood up for the most oppressed people, but especially in my role as chair of the Palestinian delegation in the European Parliament. And when we hear about the number of women and children who have been slaughtered during that conflict and what is happening in Gaza, I'm sure all our hearts are sore. So nationalism, progressive nationalism, that is, not the Nara nationalism of fascism, but progressive nationalism and internationalism is something that we should all cherish and take forward.
Thank you, Martina, for this. Progressive nationalism, indeed, is an interesting concept that I take from you, and the importance of having broad political agendas such as this one, and then integrating, as I've heard today, the women's agenda into political parties' agenda. There was one more question we got that we didn't have time to take up, but it's an important one. Turning to you, Victoria, now, would be from your experiences as a combatant, as negotiator, and later on as leader, political leader in the Congress, as well as on the field, in the community. What would be your recommendation for peace builders?
Bueno, primero me uno al clamor.
First, I join to what Martina has said because of the situation of Palestine. This call is very important. We need to stop this genocide, particularly against men, women, and children. And secondly, towards the recommendation, we have been working in something in Colombia, and that has got a lot of strength in the framework of total peace, what the government is saying, participation, the effective participation of society from a specific way of women. Any future peace agreement with any organization and all the solutions that the government is trying to find with groups that are also criminal groups, all the kind of agreements should have the women's agenda, and that's not possible if women are not participating on this scenario. And secondly, politics has to change. So we can have a lasting and sustainable peace. Politics has to change, and the change and transformation also implies to involve women's speakers, women who are seeking a society transformation. Because there are women who are not pretending the transformation. They are also conservative, and they are hierarchical and chauvinist and patriarchal. So we need to promote women who are involved in this transformation.
And thank you, Victoria, and thank you all of us for those thoughts. And indeed, I think in International Women's Day coming up in a couple of days, it's important to, on the one hand, think about those women and girls who are suffering onslaughts such as in Gaza, but also to think about those women and girls who are trying to transform politics and to build more inclusive and equal societies. I've been wonderfully inspired by all four of you. I want to thank you very much for those thoughts that you have shared with us today. As I said, we will have soon an event on women's political, let's say, women's leadership roles, formally and informally, in peace processes. We will also have very soon another event led by Barkov on a dialogue between transitional justice and climate justice, which we will post in the chat. That's going to be our next event. Thanks to all of those who have joined, who have stayed. We have still more than 100 participants who stayed for the full 1.5 hours. This is wonderful, and I think it testifies to the importance of the topic we are discussing today. So yes, one last time, thank you to all four of you, to the rest of you, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Hasta luego. Gracias.